For most of the session today, we are going to take a look at what's new in Camtasia 2021 as it has shipped. You can go get it, and I'll put some links and stuff in the chat box for you to do that. Before we get to that, I'm going to give you step number 1 for upgrading to Camtasia 2021. Do not uninstall previous versions of Camtasia. There are several reasons for this, not the least of which is the new recorder in 2021 that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. But anytime a new major release comes out, it is not unheard of for there to be some initial problems. Ask me how I know that. But do not uninstall your other versions of Camtasia. They will run side by side just fine. And if you have occasion to need to go back to previous projects to maybe export some stuff easily, create packages and things like that, you're gonna want the previous version. Okay, so just wanted to give that quick tip. And primarily tonight we're going to look at new features in Camtasia 2021. If you go to the Camtasia version history, kind of has a little bit of a list of things here, and Ron and I have been going back and forth and trying to figure out what's what and which ones are which. We've been working with the beta for quite a while, so this is essentially the official list from TechSmith. And if you don't have this saved here, version history, this is kind of a handy thing to refer to periodically, and I'll put this link in the chat box. Go to version history. This will kind of tell you as the new minor releases come out also what features are in the program, and we have kind of negotiated all this into kind of a list of new features and functions in Camtasia 2021. Now, in Camtasia 2020, there were like 50. I mean, 2020 was a huge update. And 2021, not as big, but very, very functional, and we'll look at some of the features. So this is kind of for my reference here, but essentially we are going to jump over and wander through all of these various pieces and parts and properties and stuff. Okay, so I'm going to start off with one that's not real easy for me to demo over the webinar, but first up is a new welcome screen. And when you first launch Camtasia 2021, you'll see that the welcome screen has a new look and feel. It's very big, very bold, very clean, and you can get to your existing projects, start new from template, create a new recording, and all that good stuff. And also, right on this interface, you can click the Learning tab and get to a whole bunch of getting started tutorials, and you can also access various help functions, nice and easy peasy right here. So kind of a minor thing, but a little work on the UI never hurt anybody as a rule. So let's jump over to Camtasia. Let's take a look at what's new in Camtasia 2021. So first up, there's a lot of new transitions. In fact, if you go to the Transitions tab, there are 75 new ones. And a lot of these are pretty cool. We talked about them last time. I'll let this roll for a second. New and interesting, very dynamic. A lot of them work and act like some of our track mat features and transitions that we've kind of had to hack and do some work on and stuff, but I like them. They're really very nice. So I'll actually put out a video that talks about each of these and demonstrates them and all that good stuff. But a couple of other things that you can use transitions for that not a lot of people know about. Certainly here on the timeline, I've placed transitions in between clips, and that's all fun, that's interesting and everything, but a lot of people don't know or realize that you can actually use transitions on other kinds of assets. So here we have Maggie the Wonder Dog, and I basically just put a piece of text on the screen and then added a transition on the text box itself, and just kind of watch what happens here. right? So you can get a really interesting animation effect. This one happens to be the glitch transition. And you can add transition effects like this to all kinds of assets. Here's another example of one that I kind of like. Which one is this? This is glass triangles, right? And I'll scrub through that. It does a really nice effect. So that's kind of cool. And let's see, do I have another one here? I think I do. Right, so here I have a talking head that I created with a track mat. And this is Maggie talking, because she likes to talk and stuff. And here I've also added one of the glitch animations. So just another quick and easy example of an effect that you can apply to a group here. You can apply transitions to groups. And let's just watch this one. Okay, so you can use transitions to perform animations. I like it. Let's see, what else do we have next here? There are several audio effects and improvements in 2021. So let's kind of take a look at how that works. Here, I just have a clip, and I have a background music track here. And this particular track happens to be called Aggressor. So it is a pretty loud deal. I'm going to go ahead and let this run. Welcome everybody to this narration track gets washed out, overpowered by the Aggressor track. Now, in previous versions of Camtasia, we could do something called audio ducking, and this is a little trick that I've showed you how to do before. You got to put audio points here, you put an audio point here, put an audio point here, you put an audio point here, and then you duck the background music track so it doesn't overpower your narration. Okay, well, in the new version, you don't have to do that anymore, because under audio effects, we now have this thing called emphasize. And if we take this emphasize audio effect and drag it onto the track that we want to have the emphasis on, what happens is Camtasia will auto duck this. So the music will start out nice and loud, and then I'll go ahead and let that roll. Welcome everybody to the Tuesday evening. And what happens is it automatically ducks the audio down. And you can select how much you want the ducking to occur. 100% means that it is emphasized 100% and you don't hear any other audio. And you can kind of adjust this. By default it's 80%, which is pretty good. You can also choose when the ducking occurs. On the outside, in other words, ducks down before, inside a span, or inside of the emphasis clip itself. I almost always just stick with outside, and you can ramp it in and ramp it out a little bit. But the bottom line is that this is a much easier way to do audio ducking. And not only that, it has one other nice little benefit. If I did this little trick to audio duck this, you know, the manual way, the old-fashioned way. Well, let's see. Let's shrink this down a little bit. With the emphasis effect applied to my narration track, if I move the track, the audio ducking goes with it, right? So wherever I move this to, whatever's underneath is going to get ducked. Okay. Welcome everybody. So very handy, nice time-saving feature. I like it. Another audio property that we have are some new view meters. And if you noticed before, you can look at the volume levels on the audio meter. And the new enhancement here is if you click it, it's going to toggle on a much bigger version tonight of the audio view meters. And these meters, of course, are used to tell if you're clipping your audio or not, which is a bad thing. Basically want stuff to be in the green. up around the -6 dB level is a good strong volume. So got that going on. And then one other one that's really kind of handy and that I actually like quite a bit is in previous versions of Camtasia we have this kind of awesome feature called audio leveling. Okay, if you go to project settings in 2020 or in 2021, you have this thing called auto normalize loudness. And this is a really great feature, especially if you struggle with mic placement or you record different sessions. What it does is it makes sure that the audio levels of the stuff in your project are all the same level. Okay, and if you've ever struggled with older versions of Camtasia to make sure that your loudness was the same throughout a project or across sessions, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So I like that feature, but one thing I didn't like about the feature is particularly with music tracks. Okay, if I have a music track, currently in 2020, the auto leveling levels all audio tracks. Well, when you auto normalize a music track, you can lose fidelity because of the filters and stuff that the auto leveling and the audio processing that auto leveling does by default. Well, a lot of times with a music track, I don't want that. I want the full fidelity of the music. It's already volume mixed and all that good stuff. I want the full, crisp, clear music track. So now in Camtasia, what you can do is per track, you can turn off auto normalize. Okay, so that's kind of a nice and handy feature, one that's really kind of sweet. Okay, so those are audio enhancements. Let's see, what else do we have? Here's a good one. I like this. This is something I've been asking for in Camtasia for 20 years. And lo and behold, finally, here it is. And it's called motion blur. So if we go to the visual effects, if you scroll down here, now what we'll see is that we have this thing called a motion blur. And let me just kind of demonstrate it here real quick. So here I have some text and I have an animation right here. So what I've done is I just drag the motion blur onto the text callout that I have here. And now when that animation plays, it's going to blur the text as it moves. Okay, and I know it's doing that because if I kind of scrub this through, see that? Nice motion blur. This is something that almost every other video editor on the planet has, but Camtasia didn't. So here, let's see, let's just add us another animation real quick, and we'll just drop it off. Drop it off the screen. The thing with motion blur is it is dependent upon speed. So by default, I think this is like a 1-second animation. Yeah, doesn't blur very much. The secret to blurriness is speed. So if I jack this down, the amount of time that the animation happens, it starts to get blurrier in a hurry. And additionally, we can also look at the properties for the motion blur, and you can set an intensity level. Okay, so there's that other option there. Kind of handy. It's something that I really like, not just for text, but you can also apply it to pretty much anything except audio that you can put on the timeline and animate. So here I just have a call out. It's an arrow. Right? Nice effect. Handy dandy, and it adds a little bit more of a professional touch for you. I like it. Another visual effect that we have is something called rounded corners. So here I have a video clip, right? And actually, let's just resize this a little bit. Okay, put this little pooch guy here, right? And add us a corner rounding. Corner rounding is an effect that lets us drop it on an asset. Okay, and then you have access to these properties, and you can do just a little manipulation on the object itself. Before, you couldn't really create rounded corners at all, which are kind of handy, but now you can, and you can also work with which corners you want to be rounded. So you can come up with some interesting shapes, things like this, and you can, like I say, get some pretty versatile action out of the whole thing just by deciding where you want the rounding to occur. I like that one. You can also do it to shapes. Here I've added the corner rounding, and now finally in Camtasia we can have a rounded rectangle. The media mat. This is one I talked about in my previous video. Let's take a look at this guy. In previous versions of Camtasia, we could create a track mat by using a shape. Here I just have a hexagonal shape, and what you used to have to do was go here and then create an alpha mat, okay, and then you had to group them, and then you had to delete the mat, and just a whole process. This is a whole bunch easier. So here, let's remove this real quick. Just have a shape, right? And let's go to Visual Effects and let's add us a media mat. Boom! Done. Over. Right? And you have access to all the various properties and media mat types. It works with images. So here I just have a shape image. Okay, and I added the media mat to it and an alpha mat. It's not just for shapes that are in Camtasia. It works on video clips, media mats. So much easier, so much more robust in that sense. Here's another kind of big feature that I like a lot. Okay, how many of you have had a video project with lots of videos on the timeline, maybe lots of cuts, lots of edits, lots of callouts, and you go to preview and you end up with a whole jerky kind of a thing, right? And this gets worse and worse the more stuff you have on the timeline. 4K videos, 60 frame videos, things like that. The act of scrubbing or grabbing the playhead and moving back and forth, you don't really get a good preview, or it's very difficult, especially with things like MOV files, things like that. It's always been just kind of a sore spot with trying to preview your work in Camtasia. When you export the video, it's going to export it at full quality and it's going to be fine, but a nice little editing enhancement for your editing pleasure and experience is this thing called Proxy videos. So if I go to my media bin here, and what I'm going to do, let's click on this one, because it, like I say, if I scrub back and forth here, you notice it gets really jerky. Okay, so I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to right click. Let's select it in the media bin. Okay, so here it is. Now what you can do is right click and add a proxy video. When you do that, it's going to kind of go through a little progress bar here, and it's going to create a version of this video on your hard drive that's a little lower resolution, but the kind of key sauce is here, you can almost think of it as pre-rendering, or maybe in like some other applications like After Effects, you have something called a RAM preview, right? And now what happens is this is smooth as butter, right? Back, forth, up, down, inside out, doesn't matter. Your project is going to preview very, very seamlessly. And again, this is a little lower resolution, but when you export, it's going to be all just good and proper and full quality, right? And the other interesting thing here is that once you apply a proxy video to a video in your clip bin, if I started a new project and pulled this video in from my hard drive, it will recognize that it has a proxy to it. Okay, so I wouldn't have to add the proxy video to it again for it to apply. And if you want to disable that, of course, you can right click on it and delete the proxy. Yeah, what do you think of that? That's a good one.
Sweet.
That's going to make editing probably just a whole bunch easier for a whole lot of folks. Another feature is called Collapse Properties, and here I just have a piece of media. It's a picture, And I've added me just a whole bunch of effects. Color adjustment, corner rounding, colorize, border, all this stuff. And there's a lot of scrolling going on to be able to get to different stuff. Now, what you can do is you can collapse the various effect properties for a given asset. So if you double click, it's going to collapse these down. Boom, 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 boom. And now can make things easier to navigate, right? So you just double click them when you want to work with your border properties. And I am now tending in my workflow to kind of keep these closed up. Okay, and it just makes it easier to be able to get to stuff. And the other thing that I really kind of like about it is in the properties, you also see this slider button now. It's a disable effect. So here, again, I have a colorize effect. Maybe I want to kind of see what it looks like without it. So I can disable it and decide if I want to use it or if I want to modify it or whatever. But I don't have to remove it, and then re-add it if I want it later. You can just disable it, which is kind of quick and handy. Also a pretty good one. Nice little time saver. In Camtasia 2020, you introduced the concept of placeholders. And placeholders are kind of handy. We kind of like to use them in a lot of cases. And one of the things that, kind of was irritating to me, if you want to add a placeholder, in fact, let's delete this one, and let's add us a placeholder. And you can do that by just pressing the P key. Well, what it does is it adds a placeholder with a length of 1 minute. And typically, all that does is kind of mess up my project sometimes because it's so long. If I want to insert a placeholder in my project, it's just too long for most purposes. And when I drag something into the placeholder, I'm generally going to do a ripple replace or something like that anyway. So now what you can do is, it's kind of a minor one, but I think handy to me. If you go to Edit, Preferences, now under Timing, you can change the placeholder value, and I'd probably shoot for something like 10 seconds. Say OK. Let's get rid of that. Now if I add me a new placeholder, yeah, that's a lot more manageable to me. So that's another little editing productivity enhancement. Quick properties we talked about in the last session, so I'm not going to go into it too much other than to, let's maybe look at a couple of the other features. So here I've created me a group and I've added a logo as one of the quick properties. So let's go take a look at the editor, and a couple of the other things that you can do here is have a couple of other text boxes here, so I can add or delete which ones show up in quick properties, and anything that's in the group is essentially something you can add quick properties to. Images, text, callouts, and all that good kind of stuff. You can reorder them to make it a little more understandable over here when you go to work on your text. If your callout has certain order to it, like name, for example, if I was doing a lower third, I could change this, and then when we save, it'll let me know what's supposed to be in here. Okay, so that's kind of handy. Yeah, and like I say, I talked about quick properties before, so we probably won't get into that one much more. Speaking of groups, here's another one that I really kind of like. What we now have is if I open up this group, watch what happens. It opens up in a tab over here. So now I can work with all the assets in the group, essentially in place in time, but on their own timeline. Right? So I don't have any other crap and stuff on top or in the way or anything like that. I'm opening up the group in its own tab, and I can make any changes I want, and when I close the group tab, that'll all be reflected in my project. So that's really kind of handy. It's almost like some of the advanced editors use something called compositions, right? It's a way to create pretty complex stuff by grouping things up and then not having to deal with them all on the main timeline, but rather opening them up individually, making any changes, right? And then closing the group, and it's reflected in the project. Yeah, so I like those. One of my other hidden gem favorites here is something called My Colors. Now, I gotta tell you, I am not a huge fan of themes in Camtasia. You gotta create them and you gotta select all these colors and stuff like that. And don't get me started on themes. Some people love them. Okay, that's great. For me, what I want to do generally is I just want to use colors that I know I use all the time. Okay, and now, instead of going through the whole theme rigmarole, you can add colors to something called the My Colors palette here. Okay, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. For example, for me, 90% of the time when I was working with older versions of Camtasia, when you go to pick a color, this was the standard color palette that you had. And again, with the new themes, well, you can only have like 5 colors. Okay, and that makes me insane. So what I wanted to do was recreate this color palette, and now I just took a little screenshot here, had a little sample, and let's see here. I don't have this purple one yet, so I just used the eyedropper tool, selected it, and now for any color that you can configure, right, you can just click the plus button, boom, and add it down into My Colors. So now, for me, in my workflow, I have replicated, at long last, to my immense delight, my beloved colors from previous versions of Camtasia. Okay, and you can do the same thing. You don't have to screw around with themes or anything like that. It just puts the colors that you may frequently use right at your fingertips. Love it. Love that thing. Here's kind of a new one. It was new to me. This is called Support for Lottie Files. Lottie File Support. Okay, a Lottie file is basically a new kind of format. It's an animation file that is created using a programming language called JSON. Okay, so basically it's programmatic images and animation. So one of the cool things about it is depicted here has to do with file size. So PNGs are like this, GIF files are a little smaller, a little lower quality, Lotties are tiny. So this new file format is kind of interesting. They're very small, they're scalable like vector graphics, can have transparency and all that good stuff. Let's see, I do have a couple of links for you. So as we kind of dive into this and start looking around at stuff, I'll be doing some more research on this. And here, you can download just like tons of these things for free. And this is kind of what they look like. Very interesting animations, and there's a little editor. You can change things like some of the colors and things like you can with other vector graphics. Download it as a JSON file, and these will now import into Camtasia. So here's an example. You just drop the JSON file in the project, and we can do all the normal things we would do. Like here, I've split it to isolate the ending animation, or this part of the animation, and extended the frame. So all that stuff works. It's all good. Lots of cool animations that you can use. I've been downloading them and kind of playing with them. And like I mentioned, they also have transparency. And the thing with them is a lot of the animations are really short. So if I want to get this kind of an effect, here's a little place marker. Again, with transparency, bounces up and down. But if you want it to keep bouncing up and down, then all you do is just drop multiple copies of the thing, right? So that's kind of how that works. All kinds of fun, all kinds of good stuff going on with that. Here's a little one. Here's a little guy. If we look over here at the tracks, well, we've always been able to like rename a track. So here, if I have something like, I don't know, special effects, well, you can't really see it, right? Now they've given us the ability to expand the header here, at least to some degree. It's not a ton, so you can't write a book in here, but it is kind of handy if you want to be able to give more descriptive names to your tracks and stay a little bit more organized. One kind of interesting thing is now if you go to File, Save As, we have the ability to create what's called a standalone project. So if this box is checked and you click Save, it's going to create this kind of project right here, and it has this little icon. It looks like a Camtasia project file, TSC proj file, but in reality it's actually a folder. So you can actually double click this, and as a standalone project, it's kind of like export as a zip file, but it's just into a project folder. Okay, and it has all of the various assets. Each time you save, it's going to update this and remove or add new assets that you include in it. And also, if you want, you can drag and drop and copy this to another drive, and inside the folder itself you'll see that, oh, okay, this is the actual Camtasia project file. So you double click this, all your stuff is right here. It's not going to get lost. It's going to know where to find everything. Okay, so that's kind of cool. That's good. Another minor thing, quite frankly, I don't know why you would want to do this, to tell you the truth, but it's called Disable Transitions. So let's go back to our transition stuff. Let's click on this guy, and what you can do is you can right click on it and disable this transition. I guess maybe if you want to audition not having a transition as opposed to having a transition, this might be kind of useful. I don't know. But anyway, there you have it. It's in there. So that's in there. What's not in there is the new Camtasia 2021 recorder that is usable, right? So when you install 2021, here's another reason not to uninstall previous versions. Here's the new recorder. It's going to have a nice new clean interface. It's sweet looking, right? What it doesn't have are any options. Anything. You can't change frame rate. You can't use hotkeys. You can't tell it where you want to save your recording files. It's going to pile them all in the standard directory. It is literally worthless, in my humble opinion. And they released this with the intention that all of those features will be very forthcoming in a new maintenance release. For the time being, they give you some silly legacy recorder that you got to navigate into your TechSmith folder, and it's ugly. I just used the 2020 recorder because I did not uninstall my other version. Okay, so here's kind of the official scoop on that. I mean, it's just nothing. It's bare bones. And if you want to record in HD or a couple of other default formats, that's fine. It'll work. But you can't do any of the useful things as far as workflow. Like I say, you can't use hotkeys. You can't change the frame rate. You can't change the recording location. Anything that good workflow pretty much demands. So my workaround for the moment is to just not do that. Right? So there's that. Lots of interesting and new features, and if you want to go ahead and check this out, it is now live. You can go here and upgrade. A lot of you took advantage of a special that TechSmith had before where you could upgrade to 2020, and they also gave you a year of maintenance. Well, the upgrade now has the same thing. Go ahead and upgrade, and you get Camtasia 2022 for free. So again, those of you that took advantage of this, I think it was a couple of months ago, for 2020, you are receiving an email that says, hey, 2021 has shipped. here's your free key. Download and go to town. And to download, basically you just go grab the new code, the trial code, and you can do that here. Just download the trial code, boom, 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 and you can go ahead and upgrade. The trial code is basically full release code, and you'll just enter in your key to activate it. No big deal. All right, let's see, what else? Any questions on 2021? Oh, I'll give you one other tip. Before you upgrade to Camtasia 2021, in your Camtasia 2020, one thing that I did, and we talked about this before, I think, I go to, I'm trying to export a package. There we go, package. I select everything. Select all, select all, select all, and export a package. And that way, if for some reason some of your favorites or your library assets don't come across in the upgrade, you can always just open that package. And boom, there you go. It's just a good backup to have. Think of it as a backup of all of your libraries, all of your favorites, all of your tools, which are presets and themes and all that good stuff. So creating a backup like that is a good idea.